Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. That night, the rain didn't just fall, it attacked. Sheets of water slammed against my windshield, the wipers thrashing back and forth in a hopeless rhythm that couldn't keep up. The road ahead looked like a river of glass and shadow, slick, with distorted reflections that danced under my headlights. I was bone-tired, the kind of exhaustion that seeps into your bones after a brutally long shift. But sleep wasn't an option. I was miles from anywhere, winding through a forest so quiet and empty it felt like the world had folded in on itself. All I wanted was to get home, to sink into my couch wrapped in a blanket, with something warm in my hands and the kind of silence that didn't press in from all sides. But life had other plans. The car gave a subtle jolt, just enough to pull me from my thoughts. Then came a grating, mechanical sound, like metal tearing. The speedometer needle dipped slowly, then dropped, completely as the engine sputtered and died. My foot tapped the gas uselessly. Nothing. "Come on," I muttered, twisting the key in the ignition again. Silence. Not even a cough. I leaned back in my seat and rubbed a hand down my face, slick with something that might have been sweat or maybe just the damp air creeping through the seams of the door. I couldn't tell anymore. The world outside was a black void carved by streaks of rain, and there wasn't a single car in sight. I grabbed my phone. No bars, of course. Not even a flicker of signal. So I sat, listening. Rain hammered the roof, steady and punishing. Now and then the wind shifted and I swore I could hear something else. Branches cracking maybe under the weight of the storm. But each sound made me flinch. There was something off about this night. Something deeply wrong. Time crawled. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The isolation was suffocating. Every creak of my car, every whisper of water down the glass, every shift of shadow outside. My body reacted before my mind could reason with it. My heart thumped hard in my chest and I started imagining things. At least I hoped I was. Then I saw it. A pair of headlights, faint at first, blurred by the rain, but growing brighter, heading straight toward me. Relief surged through me, quickly tangled with unease. Who else would be out here? I jumped out, waving both arms like a man drowning. The rain soaked me instantly, cold and biting. The vehicle, a black pickup truck, slowed, pulling up beside me. The headlights were blinding and I had to shield my eyes as the engine idled low and steady. The driver rolled down the window. He was massive, broad shoulders, face weathered like old leather and crisscrossed with scars. Not the kind of scars you get from accidents, but the kind that come from violence. His eyes were flat, no warmth, just cold, emotionless calculation. He stared straight at me and I swear he saw through my skin. "Car died," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "No signal. Can you give me a lift?" He didn't say a word, just jerked his chin toward the back of the truck. His lips twitched, but whether it was a smirk or just a tick, I couldn't tell. That's when I saw her. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. But then she moved, just a little. There, in the faint glow spilling from the cab, was a girl, young, bound. At the wrists, duct tape across her mouth. Her eyes, Jesus, her eyes were huge with terror. She locked onto me, silently screaming, pleading. I froze. Every instinct screamed run, but I couldn't move. My thoughts tumbled over each other in a panic. I looked back at the man, trying not to let my face betray what I'd seen, but he saw. He followed my gaze. In one swift motion, he slammed the truck's rear door shut, hard enough to rattle the frame. His posture changed, tense, aggressive. My breath caught in my throat. Think. I took a shaky step backward, heart pounding, trying to look casual. Maybe I'll just wait here for someone else, I said, forcing a nervous laugh. Probably just flooded the engine. He didn't respond, just stared. As he turned and pretended to check something near his tailgate, I moved slowly, trying to buy time. I ducked into the back of my car, desperately rummaging for something, anything. a tire iron, a wrench. Hell, even a flashlight with some heft. But there was nothing. Rain ran down my face like tears, soaking my clothes, my skin clammy and cold. My hands shook. Then, just as I was about to give up hope, another light crept into view. A second set of headlights growing steadily brighter, cutting through the gloom with a familiar rhythm. 2 narrow beams and a flicker of orange on the roof. A tow truck, or maybe a state patrol. Help, real help. The man's head snapped toward the light. His jaw tightened. I saw him weighing options: fight, flight, or bluff, and me, I had a decision to make: stay frozen or act before he did. A police patrol car. The second I recognized the shape of it cutting through the rain, a flood of conflicting emotions hit me. Relief and fear twisted together in my chest so tightly I could hardly breathe. The black pickup, once a looming figure of dread, was now caught squarely in the patrol car's beam, exposed and pinned like an insect under a magnifying glass. 2 officers stepped out, flashlights slicing through the rain as they approached. One swept the beam across my stalled car. The other turned his light on the truck. The driver stood stiff, his shoulders hunched as if bracing against something much heavier than the rain. He tried to act casual, but the nervous twitch in his jaw betrayed him. One of the officers called, out, firm and calm. "Sir, could you open the back of the truck, please?" "No," the man barked far too quickly. "Ain't nothing back there, just tools and junk, work stuff." His voice cracked. Weak excuses, strung together like a bad lie told under pressure. The second officer stepped forward, hand hovering near his holster. "Open it. Now." A beat passed, long and loaded, before the man took a step back reluctantly. But he didn't move to open the door. Instead, he glanced over his shoulder like a cornered animal. The officer didn't wait. He drew his weapon, with practiced calm. "Step aside." The man froze. The rain had gone quiet in my ears, muffled by the thunder of my pulse. It felt like the forest itself was holding its breath, every tree a silent witness. Then the officers opened the truck's rear door. She was there, the same girl. Her eyes were wide, blinking rapidly against the light. Her skin was pale, her hair plastered to her face with sweat and rain. She struggled weakly, trying to sit up, her hand still bound behind her, the duct tape across her mouth smeared and loose. The officers sprang into action. The moment the man realized he'd lost control, he turned and bolted. But he didn't get far. They tackled him to the ground in seconds, shouting commands, their voices cutting through the night. He fought like a cornered animal, but it was no use. I watched from the side, barely moving. I don't even remember breathing. My whole body was numb, as if the cold had finally seeped all the way in. The man's face was twisted, the bravado gone, replaced by something wild, desperate, unhinged. The girl was lifted gently into the, patrol car. One of the officers sat beside her, speaking softly, offering her a blanket and whatever comfort he could manage in that moment. She looked like a ghost, half here, half somewhere else far away. And I just stood there in the rain. The black truck no longer seemed powerful, just a metal husk sitting on 4 tires, a grim reminder of what it had concealed. It was still sinister, but stripped of its teeth. I watched the officers cuff the man and load him into the squad car, separate from the girl. They didn't say much to each other, working with a tense efficiency. One of them approached me. "You all right?" I nodded. I think I said yeah, but it barely made it out of my throat. My car was still dead. The rain hadn't let up. But none of that mattered anymore. What mattered was what I'd just witnessed, what I'd narrowly escaped. Evil didn't come with glowing eyes or claws. It came in human form with a driver's license and a truck, and a chilling ability to smile while hiding something unspeakable. They called for backup. Another car arrived, then a tow truck for me. I stood under a makeshift umbrella one of the officers handed me, watching them drive off, him in one vehicle, her in another. The road was quiet again. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that lingers, in the bones. In the weeks that followed, I replayed that night in my head over and over. The rain on my windshield, her eyes, locked with mine, begging without a word. His face, dead cold, full of something I still can't name. And the red and blue lights that appeared just in time, like the world refusing to let something awful happen without a fight. I asked myself, again and again, what if they hadn't come? Would I have done something? Would I have been able to stop him? Or would I have ended up like her, or worse? The terror that gripped me that night wasn't born of the supernatural. It was primal, human. It was the kind of fear that comes when you realize just how thin the line is between ordinary and monstrous. But there was hope too, in the timing, in the officers who didn't hesitate, in the fact that someone did come, that someone cared. Still, the scars remain. Every time I drive through a lonely stretch of road, I check my rearview mirror more than I need to. My eyes linger, longer on pickup trucks than they should. And when the rain starts to fall heavy and relentless, I feel it all over again. That night lives with me now. Not like a nightmare I can forget, but like a warning, whispered in the dark. True horror doesn't need shadows or spirits, it just needs a man who's lost all sense of what's right. My name's Edward. I grew up tucked away in a forgotten pocket of the Scottish Highlands, a village so small and remote it barely made the maps. When I say small, I mean you could count the buildings on both hands and still have fingers left. There were 2 farms with massive, weather-worn stone houses, each passed down through generations like family heirlooms. 6 other homes dotted the land, humble and sturdy, their chimneys always coughing smoke into the gray sky. We had a tiny farm store that sold basics and gossip, and a coffee shop that opened when the weather allowed and closed the moment it didn't. Our only link to the rest of the world was a crooked bus stop by the main road, where a rusted bench faced a timetable that lied more often than not. That old bus was a rare visitor, limping into the village like it was doing us a favor. For 17 years, that bus was my lifeline to a wider world. Whenever it bothered to show up, I'd take it to the nearest town and soak in every second of normalcy. Neon signs, the smell of chip shops, strangers who didn't know my name or my family's history. All of us kids, me, Lester, Danny, and Paul, we grew up in the same vacuum, surrounded by nothing but wind-swept fields and silence so thick it could press down on your chest. We knew every crack in every road, every hill, every old stone wall. That's why when I finally saved enough from odd jobs and birthday cash to buy a car, it felt like breaking out of prison. It was a second-hand hatchback, tiny and stubborn, the kind of car that coughed to life like it had just woken from a coma, but it was mine. And that meant freedom. The guys went nuts when I showed up at Danny's with it. "You serious?" he laughed, circling it like it was some kind of spaceship. We crammed into it that same day, windows down, music blaring, and drove to Inverness just because we could. We got greasy takeaway, failed to charm the bartender into serving us pints, and came back home feeling like kings. It wasn't just a trip, it was a declaration. We were done waiting for life to come to us. That night lit a spark. We started scheming. Every hangout turned into planning sessions. We didn't want to just get out, we wanted to go somewhere, and London, man. London was the promised land. We'd only seen it on TV, glittering and loud, impossibly big. It didn't feel real, which only made us want it more. We scrimped and saved for weeks. Every coin went into our London jar. We mapped out our route with obsessive precision. We'd stop in Blackpool for the night. 5 hours down, a cheap place to crash, then on to London the next morning. It felt like we were setting off on a pilgrimage, like something sacred. When the day came, we packed the car like pros, even double-checked the tire pressure. Our parents were half proud, half worried. My mum shoved a crumpled tenner into my hand and told me not to do anything bloody stupid. We waved goodbye like soldiers heading off to war. The drive was long but electric. Jokes flew, playlists shuffled, and the car hummed along the motorway like it was finally fulfilling its purpose. By the time we reached Blackpool, the sun had dipped, and we were exhausted, but riding high. And that's when we hit our first wall. Every hotel we tried was booked. Every receptionist shook their head, some more apologetically than others. We didn't think to reserve a head. Why would we? We were 16, maybe 17, invincible and idiotic. After the 6th or 7th rejection, Paul muttered, "We're gonna have to kip in the car, aren't we?" And that's exactly what we did. We pulled into a quiet petrol station on the edge of town, parked in a shadowy corner, and tried to make ourselves comfortable. The seats didn't recline much. My neck bent at some unnatural angle, the seatbelt buckle dug into my hip, and the air inside smelled like sweat and old crisps. But I was too tired to complain. Sometime around 3 a.m., I felt a finger tap my shoulder, sharp and urgent. I startled awake. Lester was crouched beside me, whispering, "Mate, I gotta piss." I groaned, groggy and stiff. "You serious? Just go." "I'm not pissing on the car," he hissed, already fumbling with the door. I dragged myself out and stood next to the car, shivering in the night air. The petrol station lights buzzed in the distance, casting a sickly yellow glow. Everything else was shadows and silence. Lester vanished into the bushes by the edge of the lot, and I leaned back against the car, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, waiting. At first I didn't think much of how long he was taking, but then the silence stretched and stretched. The night had a stillness to it, the kind that feels unnatural, not peaceful, hollow. The wind whispered through the trees, brushing the leaves just enough to remind you that something was out there. I stood there rubbing the sleep from my face, eyes squinting against the dark as I waited for Lester to come back. But he didn't. At first, I figured he was just taking his time, maybe even messing with me. That was Lester, after all, always the prankster. But as my eyes adjusted, I caught a shape in the gloom about 20 feet out, barely visible between the shrubs and low trees. It was him. He wasn't moving, just standing there, motionless. "Lester?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. No response. He didn't even flinch. Then, like a rubber band snapping, he turned and ran, arms pumping, feet pounding the gravel. I barely had time to react before he flung himself into the back seat, gasping like he'd been drowning and just broken the surface. "Start the car!" he yelled, voice cracking. "Start the car! Now!" The others jerked awake, confused and blinking in the dim light. "What the hell's going on?" Danny asked, his voice thick with sleep. "Just drive, Ed!" Lester screamed, grabbing the back of my seat. His face was white, his pupils huge and wild. "We have to leave. Now." That was all I needed. I didn't argue. I turned the key, the engine sputtered to life, and I slammed it into gear. The tires squealed as we tore out of the lot, gravel spitting from under the wheels. My hands were shaking, but I gripped the wheel like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. We drove in silence for a few miles, the only sounds the hum of the engine and the occasional ragged breath from the back seat. Finally, when the lights of Blackpool were a distant glow behind us, I glanced in the mirror and asked, "Lester, what happened?" He didn't answer right away. He was staring straight ahead, not really seeing anything. His lips moved silently, like he was trying to push the memory away before it could solidify. Then, in a broken voice, he spoke. "I heard something. When I was out there, thought it was just an animal at first, some kind of soft thumping, but it wasn't that." He swallowed hard. "I went deeper into the bushes, trying to find a spot. That's when I saw them. 2 people, one kneeling over the other. At first, I thought they were, going at it, in the woods. But something felt wrong. It was too quiet. The one on the ground wasn't moving. No sounds. Just that dull thud." He closed his eyes, his breath catching in his throat. He wasn't hugging the other guy. He was stabbing him, over and over, in the chest. I could see the blade glinting even in the dark. The guy on the ground was twitching with every hit like his body didn't know it was dead yet. We all went quiet. The air in the car seemed to grow thicker, heavier. I must have stepped on something. A branch, maybe. It cracked. The guy looked up, right at me, and I swear to God, Ed. He smiled. The silence that followed felt deafening. That's when I saw them, headlights in the rearview mirror. Bright. Too bright and getting closer fast. A few years back, I set out on a solo road trip I'd been planning for months. Routes mapped, gear checked, playlists curated down to the minute. The goal? Hike through some of the country's most awe-inspiring national parks. I've always turned to the trail to clear my head, and I'd already explored some remarkable places over the years. But this trip, this one felt different. Like I was chasing something, not just scenery, but silence, solitude. I wanted to feel far away from everything. And I got that, just not in the way I expected. It was the second night on the road. I was somewhere in that vast nowhere between two small towns whose names I don't even remember anymore. The highway unspooled in front of me like a dark ribbon. No other cars in sight, only the steady hum of tires on asphalt and the occasional flicker of my headlights catching a road sign. It was 11:47 p.m. I remember because I glanced at the EO clock right before things got weird. My eyes were dry from the drive, my body tired but wired. The kind of wired that feels like your brain's running too fast and too slow at the same time. Then suddenly, headlights in my rearview mirror. I didn't realize how much the empty road had started to feel like a cocoon until that moment. The approaching car felt almost like an intrusion. Still, I welcomed it. Human presence, even from a stranger, was oddly reassuring out there in the void. The vehicle crept up behind me, then shifted into the left lane, as if to pass. But it didn't. It just stayed there, matching my speed perfectly. I frowned. I nudged my car a little faster, so did he. Slowed down. He matched me again. We were locked in this strange, synchronized cruise. I glanced to the side, trying to get a look at the driver without being too obvious. My peripheral vision caught just enough. A bald man, face tilted slightly, in my direction and sunglasses at night. Something in my chest tightened. It was subtle but real. My instincts flared, that quiet primal part of the brain that doesn't explain itself but whispers, something's not right. Then he rolled down his window and began waving. Frantic, sharp movements like he was trying to flag down a lifeguard. His mouth moved fast. He was shouting something, I think, but I couldn't hear anything over the wind and speed. He kept pointing at my car, gesturing downward like something was wrong with it. I did a mental checklist in seconds. Flat tire? Engine trouble? Did something fall off? I glanced at my dashboard. Everything looked normal. No warning lights, no strange noises. Just the steady, smooth glide of the road beneath me. Still, he was persistent. His eyes were hidden, behind those glasses, but his body language screamed urgency, like he knew something I didn't. I gripped the wheel tighter, torn between instinct and logic. What if he was right? What if I ignored him and something really was wrong? A few miles. Later, I saw a green exit sign coming up. A rest stop, maybe a gas station. My heart pounded in time with my turn signal as I veered off. I told myself I'd stay under a streetlight, keep my keys in hand, not get out unless I had to. Just see what he had to say. The exit led to a narrow road and a single dimly lit gas station that looked like it hadn't seen much life in years. One of those places with flickering overhead lights and peeling signs. The kind you'd swear was abandoned if it weren't for the faint buzz of the fluorescents. I pulled in under the brightest light I could find. My car idled quietly as I watched his vehicle slide in beside mine. I didn't get out right away. He did. The man stepped into the glow, his bald head catching the harsh white light. The sunglasses were still on, thick, jet-black lenses that made his face unreadable, but he smiled. Too wide. The kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Not that I could see them, but I knew. He stopped beside my window and pointed to the back of my car. "There's something wrong with your exhaust," he said, voice soft, calm, completely at odds with how manic he'd been moments earlier. I saw black smoke coming out. Could be serious engine trouble. I rolled down my window just a crack. Enough to hear him, not enough for him to reach through. "Black smoke?" I repeated, my tone somewhere between skepticism and fear. "I didn't notice anything." "Trust me," he said, nodding solemnly. "I know what I saw. Could be your catalytic converter. Could be worse. You shouldn't be driving it. You'll burn out your engine, maybe start a fire. I know a mechanic. Just down the road. He's open late." He pointed vaguely toward the darkness behind the station. I stared at that patch of blackness, trying to make out a building or a sign, anything. There was nothing. Just empty road and tall grass. "You'll be fine," he added, sensing my hesitation. "It's just 5 minutes from here. I'll take you." I looked at him again. The sunglasses, the too perfect calm, the weird timing, the fact that he had followed me off the highway, not the other way around. "Appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I think I'll call roadside assistance just in case." For a split second, his smile faltered, just a twitch at the corner of his mouth. Then it was back, wider than before. "No need for that. You'll be waiting forever out here. Trust me, I'm just trying to help." I didn't answer. I slowly rolled the window back up, locking eyes with my reflection in the glass instead of with him. My fingers hovered over the ignition, muscles tense, every instinct I had screaming now. He stood there for another few seconds, then, without another word, turned and walked back to his car. But he didn't leave. He just sat there, engine running, lights on, watching. The moment he suggested the mechanic, it felt like a trap had been sprung, like I was the only one who hadn't realized. We were already deep inside the jaws. My stomach dropped. Midnight, deserted gas station. A helpful stranger with a convenient solution just beyond the reach of the lights. It all stank of setup, of danger draped in politeness. Every instinct I had, every evolutionary alarm bell, screamed, "Get out." "Appreciate it," I said, forcing a tight smile. "But I'll take a look myself first." He didn't respond, just watched. I rounded the back of my car slowly, keeping him in my peripheral vision. My breath fogged in the cool night air, and I crouched beside the rear bumper. My heart pounded against my ribs like it wanted out. If black smoke had been pouring from the exhaust, there'd be residue, soot, grime, something. I reached out with trembling fingers and ran them along the metal. Nothing. The chrome was clean, cool under my skin, untouched. As spotless as when I'd left home 2 days earlier. My pulse doubled. He'd lied, not misjudged, lied. I stood up, jaw tightening, the cold night suddenly too silent, like the world was holding its breath. I turned to confront him and didn't even get a word out before something slammed into the side of my face. The impact was sharp and disorienting, like an explosion inside my skull. I staggered back, my vision swimming. Then another blow hit me hard across the temple, pain radiating through my entire body. I collapsed to one knee, struggling to stay conscious. Through the haze, I saw what he was using, a glass liquor bottle, heavy, dark, still intact, though now slick with my blood. There was no warning, no hesitation. He just attacked. Why? I tried to speak, but another swing came at me. I flinched hard and ducked just enough to avoid it. My body moved on, instinct survival kicking in. I backed away, unsteady, adrenaline surging. He came at me again, swinging wild now, aggressive, fast. That's when I saw his eyes. His sunglasses had slid down just enough to reveal them. Cold, focused, no anger, no heat, just calculation, predatory calm. He wanted this. He was enjoying this. He raised the bottle again, but I caught his wrist. I don't remember planning to do it. My body just moved like it had decided my brain was no longer in charge. I grabbed hold with both hands and twisted with every ounce of strength I had. The bottle clattered to the pavement and shattered into jagged, glittering shards. He grunted and staggered slightly. I didn't wait. I brought my heel down on his foot, hard, and he howled, stumbling. I felt his grip loosen, and with one hand, free. I slammed my fist upward. It connected with his face right on the nose. There was a sickening crunch and blood sprayed. His scream was garbled, animalistic. I punched again, then drove my knee into his groin. He folded, gasping, clutching, himself, falling to his knees like a puppet with cut strings. I didn't stop to look. I ran. I wrenched open my car door, barely able to keep my grip on the keys as my hands trembled violently. The engine roared to life on the second try. Tires screamed as I tore out of the gas station lot, headlights bouncing across cracked pavement. As I fishtailed onto the road and floored it, the highway swallowed me back into its dark, endless stretch. But this time, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was razor-wire tension. I kept checking the mirror over and over, half expecting to see headlights behind me, but no one followed. When I was sure I was clear, I grabbed my phone with blood-slick fingers and dialed 911. My voice shook so hard the dispatcher could barely understand me at first. I managed to get it out, what happened, where it happened. They gave me directions to the nearest hospital and I followed them on autopilot. When I arrived, I caught my reflection in the glass doors of the ER. My face was a mess. Blood smeared across my cheek and temple. My shirt darkened with stains, eyes wide and haunted. But I was still standing. That was something. The nurses moved quickly. Stitches for the cut, something for the pain. I barely felt it. Everything was distant, detached. I kept thinking of the moment I saw his eyes, how dead they were, how calm. Later at the police station, I told them everything, every detail I could recall, the glasses, the car, his voice, the grin. They took it seriously, promised they'd investigate, but I never heard back. No follow-up, no closure, just silence, as if he'd vanished into the same void he'd come from. To this day, I don't know who he was, a predator, a drifter, a psychopath hunting lonely travelers on forgotten roads, maybe all of the above. Still, I didn't let him take the trip from me. The next day, I got back on the road, bruised, stitched, and rattled, but alive. I kept my knife closer, never let my gas tank drop below half. Never stopped unless I could see other people nearby. But even now, years later, when I'm driving alone at night and the road gets quiet, I still see him in my mind. That frozen smile, the way he stood in the fluorescent light like he belonged to the night, and those sunglasses reflecting nothing, hiding everything. Some part of me knows how close I came, how narrow the escape really was, and that, more than anything, is what haunts me. My name's Jaime, and I've been behind the wheel of a cab for close to 2 decades. 20 years of watching the city breathe through my windshield. Drunks, lovers, businessmen, ghosts in human skin. You start to think you've seen it all. But there's one day I can't shake. One ride back in the summer of '81 that still makes me wake up in a cold sweat. It was the kind of summer day that sticks to your skin, hot and heavy, like the air itself was sweating. The kind of heat that laughs at air conditioning. I'd already dropped off a couple at the bus terminal earlier and I was feeling hopeful again. Business had been slow all week, and an airport run meant decent cash, maybe a generous tip if they were the right kind of passenger. I pulled up to a townhouse in a quiet, upscale part of town. Spotless white walls, trimmed hedges. Place looked like it belonged on the cover of a real estate magazine. But no one was outside waiting. I killed the engine and leaned back in my seat, drumming my fingers on the wheel. I knew the game. When they said, "I'll be out in just a minute," they really meant 10, maybe 15. I checked my watch, muttered to myself, and wiped sweat from my forehead with an old napkin I kept in the glove box. The sun was relentless. Even parked, in the shade, the cab felt like a slow-cooking oven. Eventually, the front door creaked open. A woman stepped out first. Blonde, maybe early 30s, thin. She had the kind of face that hinted at past beauty. But now she looked brittle. Her cheeks were hollow, her skin pale and marked by faint bruises and the kind of blotchiness that told me she wasn't doing well. Right behind her came a man, twitchy and greasy, with tangled hair and a beard that looked like it had never met, a comb. His clothes clung to him like a second skin of filth. They slid into the back seat. I gave my usual greeting, putting on the polite mask. "Afternoon. Headed to the airport, right?" The woman nodded, but her voice faltered. Yeah. The airport. They glanced at each other, sharing a look that sent a chill down my spine despite the heat. Something wasn't right. I felt it in my gut. We pulled out onto the highway. The city blurred by, but I kept catching glimpses of them in the mirror. The man fidgeted constantly, eyes darting, licking his lips like he had something to say but was holding it in. Then he leaned forward just enough to make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Hey," he said, tapping my shoulder with a finger that smelled faintly of motor oil and sweat. "Change of plans. We need you to take us somewhere else." I didn't turn around, just met his eyes in the rear view. "Sorry, but I can't change destinations mid-trip. It's a company rule, safety reasons." A lie, mostly. I could reroute if needed, but I didn't like the vibe. Not one bit. He stared at me, his jaw clenching. Then he leaned back slowly, whispering something to the woman. She laughed under her breath, soft, strange, joyless. Next thing I knew, he was pointing a gun at the back of my head. It was a snub-nosed revolver, old and battered but steady in his hand. I felt the air leave my lungs. "Look, man," he said, voice low and cold. "You don't seem to get it. You're taking us where we want to go, or things get real messy, real fast." I didn't move. Couldn't. My hands locked onto the steering wheel like they'd fused with it. I nodded once. "Okay, all right. Just put the gun down." He didn't. He rested it on his lap, finger still hooked around the trigger like it was an afterthought. "Good choice," he muttered. "Now hang a left." I followed his instructions, my heart hammering against my ribs, every breath shallow. He was taking me toward a neighborhood I'd only heard of in whispers, a place most cab drivers wouldn't set foot in even for double fare. As we crossed into that part of the city, the transformation was immediate. The streets turned to cracked pavement and scattered trash. Houses leaned like they were too tired to stand straight. The people on the sidewalks watched us with wary eyes, suspicion and hunger mixed together. He kept giving directions. Left, here, straight for 3 blocks, now a right. His tone was sharp now, no pretense, just urgency and control. Finally, he told me to stop. We were in front of a crumbling 3-story tenement, the kind of place that looked like it had survived. A war, windows shattered, paint long gone, graffiti crawling up the walls like veins. 2 guys stood by the front door, shirtless, lean and wiry, their torsos a canvas of tattoos. One had a scar slicing through his eyebrow. Both of them had pistols tucked into their waistbands, not even trying to hide them. They watched us approach like they already knew who was inside. And I realized then, I wasn't just a driver anymore. I was a pawn in something I didn't understand. One of the guys stepped up to my window. He was tall, lean, eyes hidden behind a pair of scratched-up sunglasses despite the failing light. His expression gave away nothing. Calm, too calm. "Nice ride," he said, nodding slowly as he scanned the cab's interior. Behind me, the man in my back seat gave a low, amused chuckle. "Yeah," he said almost fondly. "Perfect for tonight." My stomach tightened. That one word, tonight, it landed like a stone in my gut. I didn't know what they were planning, but I could feel it closing in around me. Something bad. Something I didn't want to be part of. The 2 men on the sidewalk passed a couple of small zippered bags through the window to the passengers in my back seat. I caught a glimpse of the contents. Powdery, off-white, tightly packed, and quickly looked away. I didn't want to know, didn't need to. "Just keep your head down," I told myself. "Don't make eye contact, don't ask questions." But they could smell fear. I could feel it. The way their smirks widened every time I glanced in the mirror, the way they leaned in just a little closer than necessary. They were feeding off it. My silence, my stillness, like they wanted me to squirm. "Sales are picking up," one of them muttered. "Next stop's the hot block." "Gotta hit the route before the heat gets wind," the other added. I drove, block after block, house after house. Sometimes they'd disappear inside for 5-10 minutes, sometimes longer. Each time I sat there alone in the driver's seat, clutching the steering wheel like it was the only thing anchoring me to life. The car's interior felt smaller with every stop, the walls pressing in, the air thick with the ghost of every threat left unspoken. I kept thinking, is this where it ends? Will they dump me in some alley? Will I be one of those stories other cabbies tell in hushed tones at midnight diners? He was just doing his job, and then he was gone. By the time the sun started bleeding out behind the skyline, painting the city in amber and shadow, I was a wreck. My shirt was soaked through, hands aching from gripping the wheel too hard. Then the man in the back seat leaned forward again, voice low. "All right," he said. "It's time." I didn't ask what that meant. He directed me down a narrow side street that twisted into an alley barely wide enough for the cab to pass through. The pavement was cracked and uneven, strewn with broken glass and crushed cans. It was quiet, eerily so. The distant sound of kids playing echoed off the brick walls, but it felt a world away. I parked as instructed. My hands wouldn't stop, shaking. The man's voice dropped a register, cold, final. "Take off your watch. Wallet too, and that ring." I hesitated only a second, but that was enough. He raised the revolver just slightly, no need for words. I did as I was told. My fingers fumbled over the clasp of my watch, the leather slick with sweat. My wedding ring caught on my knuckle, and for a moment I couldn't get it off. I forced it, pain flaring as it slipped free. I placed everything in the center console. My throat was tight, my mouth dry as sandpaper. "My name's Angelo. I've been behind the wheel of a cab for over 10 years now. You learn a lot about people in this job, what makes them tick, what breaks them. I've witnessed breakups that ended in tears and makeups that ended in the back seat. I've seen fights, breakdowns, laughter, confessions. You get used to the strange, but what happened a few months ago? That wasn't strange. It was something else entirely. Something colder. Something wrong. It was a Saturday night, or I guess Sunday morning technically. Around 3 a.m. That's when the city changes. The streets go quiet in a way that doesn't feel peaceful, just hollow. I call this stretch of time the cemetery shift. You drive past places where people bury their regrets in alcohol and flashing lights, bars, strip clubs, the kinds of spots where nobody's really happy, just trying to feel less alone. I just dropped off 2 girls outside some dive downtown. One of them, giggling and clearly wasted, thanked me by lifting her shirt and yelling, "Best tip you'll get tonight." I gave her a half smile, chuckled politely, and muttered, "Thanks, I guess," as they stumbled off. It was a weird moment, but weird is normal in this line of work. I figured I'd call it a night. I was looping around the old bus terminal, mostly abandoned now, just a skeleton of its former self, when I saw him. He was standing alone under one of those old, flickering sodium lights that make everything look like it's been dipped in rust. He raised his hand slowly, deliberately, like he wasn't in a rush but knew I'd stop. And I did. As he approached, I took in the details. The man was tall and lean, dressed in a dark vintage suit that hugged his frame like it had been tailored just for him. 3-piece polished shoes and a felt hat straight out of a noir film. The whole look was so crisp it was almost eerie, like he'd stepped out of another era. Up close I realized he was younger than I thought, mid-30s maybe. His face was smooth, but his eyes, those eyes were old. I don't mean with wrinkles, I mean with weight. He opened the back door and slipped in silently, sitting with the kind of posture you only see in military officers or old-timey photographs. The cab felt colder the moment he got in. I glanced at him through the rear-view mirror. "Where to, sir?" He didn't answer right away, just stared out the window like he was searching for something in the fog. Then calmly he said, "I don't really know. I'm in town on business, thought I'd see the sights, with someone local." I gave a small laugh, trying to shake off the tension his voice gave me. It was low, smooth, measured like every word had been weighed before it left his mouth. "Well, I said, forcing a grin. As long as the meter's running, I'm happy to be your tour guide. He gave the smallest nod, and that was that. So we drove. For over 2 hours, I showed him the city. The university lit up with campus security lights, the Capitol building looming in the dark like a sleeping beast, a few parks where only raccoons and insomniacs wander at that hour. I pointed out high-end hotels, trendy restaurants, and dropped names of nightclubs I knew were still pumping music. He never said a word unless I asked a question. Mostly, he just sat there, perfectly still, hands resting on his knees, watching the world go by with this intense curiosity. Not like someone sightseeing, more like someone studying. At some point, the silence grew too heavy. I was about to ask if he wanted to head anywhere specific when he finally spoke. "You know," he said, his voice cutting through the quiet like a knife. "I'm what some people might call a hitman." I blinked. For a second, I thought he was joking or testing me. So I let out a laugh that came out thinner than I intended. "Oh yeah? What, you got a listing on Craigslist? Discreet, professional, competitive rates?" He smiled, just a slight curl of the lips, and that smile chilled me more than the words. "Not quite," he said. "My clients find me through specific channels. Let's just say by the time someone reaches out to me, they're already past the point of hesitation. There's no going back." His tone wasn't boastful. It was just matter of fact, like he was describing the steps of a mundane job, filing paperwork, fixing a leak, ending lives. I swallowed hard, hands tightening slightly on the steering wheel. I'd had shady people in my cab before, dealers, hustlers, people who were clearly running from something. But this guy, he wasn't running. He was settled. Like death itself had climbed into my backseat and was just along for the ride. His tone was calm, eerily so. Not the relaxed calm of someone telling a story, but the kind that makes your skin crawl because you realize it's not a story to him. I laughed, or at least I tried to. It came out more like a bark. Too loud, too forced. My fingers clenched tighter on the wheel, the leather groaning faintly under the pressure. I kept telling myself it was just a performance, a messed-up little act he enjoyed putting on for drivers like me. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. He kept talking, his voice steady and unnervingly smooth. "A client gives me a name, a photo, whatever intel I request. Backgrounds, habits, routines. If we agree on terms, I handle the rest. Discreet, clean, and once it's done, they'll know. Word always finds a way." The way he said it was what unsettled me most. There was no thrill in his voice, no menace, no remorse. It was the same tone someone might use to explain a morning workout routine. Efficient, professional, chilling. My heart was pounding now. I could feel it in my throat, each beat drumming against my skin like it was trying to break out. But I couldn't let him see that. I forced my voice to stay light. "And what if something goes south?" I asked, half joking, though the humor was barely hanging on. "You know, client slips up, gets caught, starts talking." He met my eyes in the mirror. There was a flicker of something, amusement maybe, or something colder hiding behind it. "Have safeguards," he said. "Contingencies. No one knows my name, no paper trail, no digital footprint, and anyone who could talk doesn't. I don't leave loose ends." I didn't respond. I couldn't. We drove in silence for a long time after that. Just the hum of the engine, the occasional hiss of tires on damp asphalt. I was suddenly aware of every little sound, the soft creak of the suspension, the faint buzz of a street lamp as we passed under it. My mind was racing, analyzing every word he'd said, every pause, every inflection. Was he just screwing with me? Or was I really giving a ride to someone who made a living out of killing people? The city was beginning to wake up. The dark sky was starting to bleed light along the horizon, painting the buildings in pale gray. That's when I finally asked the question that had been sitting on my tongue like a stone. "You said you're here on business, and does that mean you were, planning to do a job?" He didn't answer right away. Just stared out the window as we passed an empty park, the kind that looks haunted before dawn. Then slowly a smile curled on his lips. "I was," he said casually, like he was talking about a canceled dinner reservation. But I got word to stand down. Client changed their mind. Happens, believe it or not. Especially with women. They get cold feet, emotional creatures, he chuckled then. A quiet, almost intimate sound, but it didn't feel warm. It felt like someone closing a coffin lid. By now, we'd pulled into the parking lot of one of the older boutique hotels near downtown. He reached into his coat, pulled out a roll of cash, and peeled off a thick stack without even looking. "Keep the change," he said, eyes meeting mine in the mirror. "I enjoyed our ride, Angelo." I froze. My breath caught. I hadn't told him my name. No one had. My ID wasn't posted anywhere in the cab. It was one of the few perks of driving an older model. No digital screen, no display with my info. I hadn't introduced myself, hadn't said a word about who I was. But he knew. I turned around slightly, forcing a stiff smile. "Appreciate it, sir," I said, voice shaking just enough to make me wince. "You, take care now." He opened the door but paused, turning back one last time. He leaned in just slightly and spoke in a low whisper that cut through me like ice. "Take good care of Maya and stay out of trouble, all right?" Everything inside me stopped. My chest went tight. My ears were ringing. Maya, my wife. Well, separated technically. We'd been on and off for months, barely speaking. We had only recently started talking again, trying to patch things up, trying to figure out if there was anything left to salvage. I hadn't mentioned her, not to him, not to anyone that night. I watched him walk away, his long shadow stretching behind him as the light from the street lamps dimmed in the dawn. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. I just sat there. I don't know how long. My hands were locked on the wheel, knuckles pale, fingers numb. It felt like waking from a nightmare while still trapped inside it. By the time I pulled myself together and drove home, the sky was streaked with gold, the city yawning itself back to life. When I walked through the door, Maya was in the kitchen. She looked up from the stove, gave me a tired smile, and said, "You're home early." I stared at her. She looked the same. Messy bun, old hoodie, barefoot, holding a spatula like a sword. Normal. But I couldn't shake the image of that man's eyes, the way he said her name. "Yeah," I said finally. "Just long night." She laughed softly. "Well, you're just in time. Coffee?" I nodded, forcing a smile that felt brittle, ready to snap. "Sure, yeah, that'd be great." But the whole time, my brain kept churning. Had she? No, that was crazy. She wouldn't, she couldn't. Still, the thought was there now. A quiet parasite burrowed deep in my mind. Was he just a master manipulator spinning lies for sport? Or was it real? Did someone actually try to end me, then decide, at the last minute, that I was worth sparing? And if so, why? Now every time I look at Maya, there's a flicker of doubt I can't drown out. Every smile feels just a little too practiced. Every touch a little too deliberate. And no matter how much I want to forget that night, I can't. Because I remember his face, his voice, and I remember exactly how he said it. "Take good care of Maya."